So, welcome to AHA Conversations, the podcast where we explore the world of HR, people data, and analytics. And occasionally, I think we're going to go off script, maybe talk a bit about rugby, AI quirks, and spreadsheet disasters.
AHA Conversations is proudly brought to you by Agile HR Analytics, helping HR teams turn people data into real insights without needing a PhD or big budget or a 12-month implementation. From dashboards to decision-ready tools, Agile HR Analytics gives you the power to see what's really happening in your workforce and what to do next. We are your hosts, Lucia Petriskova and Dr. Gibbs, and we are here to have a candid, curious conversation about the future of work, data-driven HR, and the weird and wonderful world of workforce insights.
So whether you're a CHRO, an analyst, or just someone who gets oddly excited about good Power BI dashboards, I think you're in the right place.
All right, before we get into the big debates, let's rewind a bit. Who are we and how we did end up doing this? So Philip, what's your origin story in people analytics?
Oh, my origin story. Gosh, how far do we go back? I think for me, my origin story really started following my completion of my PhD or doctorate. My passion has always been in applied psychology. So following my PhD, I was a senior research associate in the Centre for Organisational Health and Wellbeing and Centre for Performance-Led HR as part of Lancaster University. And it was an amazing time because I got to work with a number of different companies and organisations and essentially trying to help them solve, people problems. So whether that was evaluating interventions and initiatives, whether that was building diagnostic tools or evaluating programs. And that's what really ignited my passion, is that really trying to solve real world problem through applied psychology. And so, but look, I decided I didn't want to be an academic. I think I drew the line at, devising a taught master's program and the lecturing and teaching. That's something that I was more interested in the applied research. So I decided to leave academia and go into the corporate world. And I've, started in the realm of human capital analytics. I think my early career was very much centered around how to foster a high performing workforce and a healthy high-performing workforce. So looking at things like, fostering, health and well-being, culture, and focusing on strategies and initiatives around and that. And so I then kind of went into looking at other human capital areas. And I think my role when I was at GlaxoSmithKline, that's when suddenly people analytics became a thing. And I was suddenly great, I found a home. All of these things that I've been doing, really around applying, science and data and rigor to, answering and solving real world problems in the realm of people analytics, I think for me was really exciting. So, so from there, I jumped over the other side of the world and I had roles at Commonwealth Bank of Australia, National Australia Bank, where I was very fortunate to head up everything from your data reporting, technology to your people analytics, as well as looking at things around your data privacy, governance, and things. To where I am now as a co-founder of Agile HR Analytics. But I think my origin story really started from that research and applied psychology side, and that's a bit about me.
Yeah, that's a good story. Actually, very similar to mine.
Yeah, what is your origin story, Lucia?
So I already at the university studied statistics, politics, and economics all together. And basically my major was focused on data and analytics. And already in that time, I considered myself a little bit of data nerd. And I think that that was my decision, at the beginning, that I wanted to focus on data. But surprisingly, after uni, I moved to Berlin and I ended up doing different roles in different startups. So I experienced sales, marketing, branding, a lot of different hats before. But I always ended up doing data and eventually people analytics. in the biggest digital bank in Europe. And that was the moment when I switched from like general company organization data to like people data. And once I understand the value of this function, I never turned back. Since then, I always focused on HR analytics, people insights, and I see like why it's very like necessary for the companies and like why we should focus on that. So that's
Amazing.
my story in the nutshell.
And now you're in New Zealand. So how did you come from Germany to New Zealand?
Yes. So actually, my partner is from New Zealand. So we decided that we want to do a big move, change the hemispheres. And we ended up in New Zealand. And there I worked for the big consulting company. And I really enjoy the work I was doing there because it was everything fresh, new, and I was building people analytics as a service. And that was like everything from scratch. So I always enjoyed the challenges and kind of like starting from point zero, building the teams, building the functions, defining the metrics. I find this very exciting and I see the value. And after that, I joined another great company where I am also basically supporting people analytics as a service as well as like Power BI dashboards and solutions. So I think I will never turn away from people analytics.
I love that. And so again, I also love the fact that you've come from different geographical regions, industries and things as well. And the breadth as well that you started, not necessarily in the HR space, and talking more broader, but actually coming in and, finding, and I think good for us that you landed in the people analytics space, But given our podcast is titled about those aha moments, those light bulb moments that you have, where do you think your key aha moment was in terms of, I suppose, people, data and analytics?
I had like a very big aha moment probably during COVID period. Maybe you noticed that as well on LinkedIn. There were a lot of posts about big turnover, big attrition. Some companies were actually doing pretty badly during COVID, and there were like a lot of people burned out. Well-being was not considered in many companies. Engagement dropped. But surprisingly, I noticed that some companies were doing very well. Quite opposite, completely 360 degrees opposite. And then I was wondering, how it is that some companies are just going down and the other companies actually thrive during this time period. And there was very interesting study done by Microsoft. And they were actually, at the beginning of COVID, they struggled. They had all these problems, but they did the study. They did a proper people analytics and people insights work, and they found out the reasons and they focus on this and they build the strategy around this. So it was not just by chance that this company started to thrive, but they did proper analytics and proper insights behind that, and then they build their strategy on that. So
I remember that study. It was a really compelling study and use case, a very powerful one. So that's great.
And what about you, Philip? What was the aha moment for you?
Oh, I think for me the aha moment was, and again I'll probably go back to my PhD days, because I think what I didn't realize, when you're doing an undergrad, right, it's a lot of it is kind of just a memory, like regurgitate what we're telling you. I think you go and do a master's, we'll give you half of the information, you go away and read, and there's always two sides to a debate as long as you can evidence and justify. Whereas kind of a PhD, it was like, right, there's a room, see you later, and you have to come up with something completely new and novel. And so at the time when I started my doctorate, initially my PhD supervisor is called Carrie Cooper. He was a big pioneer in stress at work, literally wrote the book on occupational stress. So I think initially he wanted to look at doing some evaluations around stress interventions. But when I came to do my literature review, my aha moment was that this has been done to death. There's been years of literature and research on this. And at the time, this is when positive psychology became a thing. So like Marnik Seligman, who was, I think, the president of the Australia Psychology Association in the US, he was very critical at psychology as a discipline, saying, well, why are we obsessed with trying to understand what is wrong with individuals and trying to correct that? And in doing so, it's a very negative message. So hence he was saying, look, what is it like? Why can't we start to look at the other end of the spectrum as like what enables some people to flourish, thrive, never go off ill? What can we learn about that? And in doing so, have a much more positive message. So that for me was a big aha moment, because naturally I'm a bit of an internal optimist, glass half full. So I think it's something that I think for me as a personality I relate to, but also from a data measurement point of view, we didn't have a lot of data and insights around that, because and that's where I think now there's a new flurry of data and tools. I think a lot of people have just relabeled stress risk assessment tools as positive well-being, but actually if you look at the actual data and measurements, it's still very much absence, presence of signs, stresses and so forth. So I think for me that was a really big aha moment for me, is to really start to think about both sides of like, there's always a positive and a negative. So if we think about things like, attrition, like the other end would be retention, and in doing so, there's a very different lens that you would apply. So, so for me, whenever I think about things, I always think around those two, there aren't always polar opposites of the same continuum spectrum, basically. So, so that's something I think for me, I've always resonated. But then, like I say, when you think about the data, the questionings and things, it's a very different lens that you apply. So that was a big aha moment for me that I think to this day really kind of influences,
And just to continue to introducing you as a person, can you tell us some surprising fact about you?
I used to play a lot of rugby growing up, and I'm now the father of two twins. So I have a boy and a girl, and they're 7 now. And I got roped into coaching my son's under 7s rugby team. And I, to this day, I still don't know how. I was like voluntold. I think that's kind of a concept. So, and to be honest, I've absolutely loved it. I mean, but it is like managing a team of highly caffeinated squirrels, like, but yeah, it's been great. So I think for me in my spare time, love spending time with the family and the kids, and my daughter, she's really into ballet, so we always try and show up and be there, but I'm not flexible at all, I can appreciate, but it's been really good fun to been thrown in, but actually I've been really enjoying that, and it's been great fun. So that's something I do in kind of my spare time. How about yourself?
For maybe surprising fact about me could be that I have the unlimited motorbike license, and I also own very big motorbike in Slovakia. And why it is surprising, because I am only 156 centimeters tall, but the motorbike is quite big and heavy. And I did a big road trip with this motorbike around Slovakia, my home country. So, and it was always a struggle to stop on the red lights on the street. So
wow, I don't know if we can ask the editor, but I think we're gonna have to try and see a photo of that, and maybe I'll have to get a photo of me with my herding of caffeinated squirrels as well.
That would be nice.
But that'd be great, because I'm trying to picture that. I mean, like how if that falls over, how do you get that thing back up? Like, you know.
If it doesn't fall on me, then it's good. But it can be dangerous. But yeah.
Wow.
Sometimes it happened to me in the past. I needed to ask someone for help, like to lift it.
Wow.
But yeah.
Wow. But amazing. Now, that would not have been one of the things I would have guessed about you. So that's definitely a surprising fact. So I have a question for you. So if your younger self met you today, what would they think you do for a living?
How young?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's say early teenagers, like, you know, I don't know, 13.
13, okay. Because I have to remind myself, like, what was I doing at that time and the way how I was thinking. So probably I would be thinking that my job is like just create some nice colorful screens, something with design, maybe even like some commercials or something like that, completely out of space. I think my knowledge in that time was very limited, especially like regarding analytics and data.
And AI, right?
In that time, AI
exactly.
didn't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
At least not in Slovakia. But what about you? What would your younger self
So I think at 13,
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing about me, I was really into music. So I did a lot of singing. I actually played the violin and things as well. So I was part of an orchestra. So I think for me, my early career, I was very seriously considering going to music school and maybe becoming a performer, not like in a rock band or things like that, you know, but maybe as, you know, joining an orchestra and things. And yeah, so that was another factor. I really liked the music and the creativity, but again, I didn't want to. I like playing. I didn't want to teach. So things about, I'm not against teachers, you know, just throwing that out there, but I just think for me, I like the performing and being in concerts, but then I realized, you know, yeah, I think as I kind of evolved, I then got into like the psychology and I like the people side, and yeah, but initially for many years I was thinking, yeah, I want to become a professional musician.
Oh, wow. That's something I would never guess about you.
So I think occasionally, you know, karaoke's and things, you know, the early younger Phil may come out after a few drinks.
Yeah, and now we are here starting a podcast, not because we think we have all the answers, but because we are endlessly curious.
Absolutely. And so we want to caveat that obviously everything we're talking about, this is, I suppose, our views, opinions, and we fully respect that, you know, they may not always be right. There are opinions, but we welcome, you know, debates and, you know, comments and questions. And so, yeah, I think as we go through, we'd love to hear feedback and what people's views on the topics we talk about. But yeah, and possibly being a little bit caffeinated as well. So I know I think I've had 3 cups today. So I'll try and not talk 1,000 miles an hour.
So let's dive into what's happening in our space. First headline I would like to talk about is People Analytics on Life Support from Adam King. Have you read the article?
I have, and I think there's been a few articles, right? I know Josh also...
Josh Bersin?
Bersin, yeah. He, I think, had a similar article before Christmas around, you know, the value. And look, hey, we're starting bold, right? I think this is a bold title, and yet I think there is a bit of truth in it. But look, so much investment in tools and platforms, but how much of it is actually changed decisions? And I think that's the crux of the argument, really, is that, look, everyone doesn't question the value of what people analytics is, but I think, you know, based on the research, and if people are familiar with, you know, the level 1 to 4 maturity model, I think, you know, still 86% of organizations are either at the level 1 and 2, so it's really that very traditional reactive operational reporting, maybe doing a bit of advanced reporting, but just struggling to break through that wall of HR measurement and getting to leveraging more of the predictive, prescriptive insights. Really pinnacle article by Thomas Rasmussen and Ulrich as well, which is really, they're calling the action is around, we need to just go straight to answering the questions of value for the business and not trying to get overly bogged down into that operational, reactive, low value reporting, basically. And so I think, look, there is some truth in it, but at the same time. But what are your thoughts, Lucia?
Yeah, they are talking about the kind of a pyramid, right?
Yes.
That pyramid shape, when at the bottom, the maturity, like the biggest focus of the organizations is usually on ad hoc reporting. These requests are coming to people analytics, and people analytics function, or like professionals, they are just like
responding to the mailbox.
Exactly. But what we should try to do is kind of flip the pyramid, kind of like make it opposite. Try to, of course, prioritize if there is something urgent or necessary to be done. But let's keep it to minimum and try to make the value from people analytics as a function, and explain to the leadership why people analytics is important and what's the value for the organizations. And let's try to focus on this rather on ad hoc reporting tasks.
Yeah, and look, I've seen this I've been part of the teams and led teams that, and ultimately I always say, I think like one of the biggest mistakes companies make is they think, all right, I want to get into people analytics. I'm going to go and hire a data scientist, and then within 6 months they've left. And they've left because, you've taken a highly qualified, skilled person, but then maybe your data environment and the tools, you're making them work in good old Excel, and all they do is do pivot tables day in, day out. They're going to get bored. They're going to think this is not really leveraging the skills to my effectiveness, and like, it's not fun, So I think that's part of the challenge, is that, really leveraging the skills and making sure that for those highly skilled, people you have, you're leveraging them in the right way. But again, as you say, I think it's really, as Thomas and Ulrich said, it's just, I'm not a big fan of HR forcing a very generic one-size-fits-all strategy on the business. For me, the business is the strategy, and HR's role is how do we enable that through its people. So I think for me, it's going straight to what are the key questions of interest for them, what are important, and sometimes you don't need to do the most sophisticated, sexy analytics. Sometimes it's just answering the very basic questions, right? So I think for me, that's the crux of some of the challenges. And so, look, I'm not worried. I'm obviously, both of us, we're people analytics through and through. We're the data geeks. But I do think it's a bit of a wake-up call to just say, look, we can't continue to operate here, and we need to just ensure that we are adding the most value possible. So, but I suppose the question is, though, does that mean is the dashboard era ending, Lucia? As I say, that could be one of the arguments.
No, I actually don't think so, because dashboards are always like visualization. People like visualizations. People prefer visualization over text. So I think dashboards will always have value. The question is, do we train people analysts and people like HR specialists in a good way or properly, so they understand the value and the insights from these dashboards? I think that's the key. Because
the storytelling.
Exactly. Because you can have very nice visualization, but then the question is what can I do with it? What's the value? So
I agree. And I also think the other mistake is, and I've been there, is that and certainly in the organizations I've worked, there's a lot of criticism saying, look, we spend all this time creating these dashboards, but then we turn them into static documents and packs. So they're PowerPoints, they're PDFs. And so we
or
built,
even Excels,
exactly,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Because I want the extract. So we spent all this time building this amazing dynamic tool that you can drill and ask questions in the dynamic way it's intended, but we then turn it into this static point in time document. So so I also think, exactly as you say, it's the storytelling, knowing the questions, the arts and how to, but also, you know, being able to ask questions in the moment and use that. But again, there's skill and capability in that. And I always say is that, look, why can't you take your people analysts in those meetings to kind of ask those, rather than the meetings happen, here's a load of takeaways, and can you regenerate the packs based on, we want to look at this, and that would just be applying a filter on the dashboard. But actually, no, we want you to put that in a PowerPoint, so that we're just adding another 10 slides, you know, and how much work is that, you know? And so I suppose the other question is that, how do we make insight delivery useful again? I think that's another key focus of the articles and things. So do we need less traffic lights, more storytelling?
Yeah. Maybe, do you want to tell us more about that?
So I think it's thinking in questions, not charts. And so I think, for me, the way I think it's going about is that it's focusing on those key personas, right? So I would always like think about, rather than take a one size fits all, you know, how are we leveraging people analytics and insights to inform those key decision forums. So whether it's like your board, it might be your executive leadership team, it might be managers or employees. So I think for me, it's, you've got to tailor the outputs for those different personas, and then kind of understand, you know, well, what are the points that are pertinent to you? What are your key priorities? How is that aligning to enable your business strategy? So I think for me, there is a bit of art there around, and that's what the insight, and I think we're going to touch on that a bit later in terms of what insight is, but it's a combination of like bringing in your context of the business. It's your, you know, working with your business partners, who's a window to the business. So, you know, the data's going to tell you one thing, but what about the qualitative? What's the sentiment telling you? You know, and ultimately it's all about, how are you going to turn this insight into then what actions you need to take? And again, I think this is where it's so important for your business partners, CHROs, because you can have the best analytics team in the world, you can have the huge team, you can have all the gadgets and tools and resources you want, but at the end of the day, if the business isn't going to act upon it, I mean, it's just an all expensive waste of time and effort at the end of the day. So I think for me, the insight delivery is so important. So I think for me, that's working with your CHROs, your business partners. How are they currently using information, or maybe they're not? What are those key decision forums? And then it's really around tailoring the outputs for those different forums and personas, and things like, you know, getting feedback. So like, you know, what, you know, the skeptical chief financial officer, they came back and challenged me on these points, you know, and so again, I think getting feedback to think, well, based on those personas and the type of inquiring questions, that can help preempt then, you know, okay, if they've asked these questions, they're likely to ask others, so you can then start to refine and tailor those. So I think for me, that's how we need to tailor and maybe make insight delivery more useful again. And again, it comes back to, I think, your storytelling as well is so important, right? So how are we going to make things so compelling that following this meeting, you have to do something about it, you know, rather than, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, let's
no action.
Yeah, nothing happens. It just goes into a black hole. I mean, how many times have you experienced where, you know, a person, like a stakeholder, comes to you and says, oh, I've got these 5 things. Can you do these 5 things, questions for me, in case they're asked in a meeting, and they're never asked. So you do all of this busy work, but nothing happens off the back of it. And it's, oh, yeah, they didn't end up asking those questions. And a little bit of me just wants to die inside, because I just feel like we've just killed ourselves to do all of this work. and you didn't do anything with it, and it was just in case, so I think maybe at the start of every bit of work it's like, okay, how is this going to be used?
Always
what are you going to do with it?
challenge.
Exactly.
Always challenge the questions coming to your direction, especially in people analytics, right? That's my experience as well, because when I started it in the digital bank, it was quite new. People analytics was just starting, and I was basically building the team from scratch. And the whole company didn't know what people analytics is and what's the value. And they were coming to me and my team with questions like, oh, I just need these numbers, and I just need that numbers. CEO wants that numbers. And then I'm asking like, okay, we can do that. We can do all the calculations, reports. But shouldn't we take a step back and like ask why? Why does he need these numbers? Why does he need these specific reports? What's the problem he's trying to solve? And I think that was my strategy. I always tried to push where it was possible for this approach, and always be in the room when this kind of like questions were raised, to be there and challenge, or maybe also like direct the conversation and the problem, because we don't want to just provide simple reporting, right, in people analytics. We want to provide insights with the value and the action points at the end.
100%. And like I say, but I mean, how many teams aren't even in the room and things, and be able to influence that? So again, maybe as well as part of that is the storytelling, it's the stakeholder management, and there's just so many things that go into factoring what, like I say, turning the insight into action, and, not just throwing lots of reports and charts, and it's kind of an ocean you can quite easily try and boil. My CHRO used to say, look, Philip, I've probably got 3 asks of the business, and you've got hundreds of measures and metrics and data points here. The business is going to say, right, tell me what 3 things we need to do. Of all of the insights, all of the data points you have, help me see the wood through the trees. And like, I just want to know, you've got 3 asks of me. And if you're going to implement some big HR change, like, that's one thing, that's one ask, already. So, just about to implement a new HCM, that's going to be one of the big asks. So you've probably got 2 things, So again, I think that's the thing around, as you say, it's, helping have those conversations and equipping the teams. And it's often, like you say, not us in the room, so it's probably other HR people, and they're not always come from a data analytics background, as well. But what they do have is they know the business, they have the context, they have those relationships. They are the ones who are ultimately our best chance to influence. So it's so I think for me, working with your CHRO, your business partners, I think is key. And as I say, there should be a key interface that you should be working with. But anyway.
Yeah. But are HR teams ready for this leap? That's a question.
That is a question. I mean, again, skills gaps, budget pressures, the tyranny of the BAU, run and maintain. So do we ever get time to focus on the strategic stuff? And again, that's the maturity, right? If we're just spending all of our time running and maintaining current state, putting fires out, you get very little time to think what's heading our way. And, so it's always a good question, but we have to be ready.
And then there is this other article, which is very interesting. Is AI eroding our critical thinking?
Look, this is a really interesting one. I think, AI is brilliant. I think so much potential. I know there's a lot of hype and excitement, so I'd always say, look, we need to temper that and have a healthy level of skepticism is always good. It's the academic in me. But look, we've seen it. I think people deferring to the model without questioning the context. And I think for me, this is my worry, is that we just suddenly have this blind trust that we're just going to put in, ask a question, and then that's the answer, and we're not going to even question that. I think that for me is the danger, is that, we should not be The critical thinking is so important, and we need that, and that's something that I think is innately human. And we know AI, it does hallucinate, it isn't always perfect, we've still got to train it, when it made a mistake, why, and this is an appropriate answer. Particularly when you're dealing with people, right? We're all different shades and colours and things. So it's not a one size fits all. People are complex, and things. So
exactly. And also, when we are asking questions to AI agents, we are getting always responses which are like simple numbers or some patterns or behaviors. But we still need this human factor to kind of review, challenge, 100%. And provide the right interpretation of this. So I think we always will need sense-making human
100%.
Who will kind of contribute to AI.
And you're even seeing it now in and again, I know we're going to probably touch on this on a bigger topic another time, but in the legislation that's coming in and things that you're seeing that, we need accountable humans at the end of owning that process. So we can't just blame the technology when it goes wrong. It's no, we need to start thinking about that. And, and for me, I'm always a bit not a fan of a lot of the SaaS tech solutions that are selling a black box, and because it's their proprietary information, they're just oh no, trust us. Yeah, we built it. It's brilliant. Trust us. And we're just okay, it looks great, and we'll just take your word that it's work, and you factored in the any biases, the reliability and things, and you're not and we've seen the dangers of when it goes wrong, right? And so I think for me, as I said, look, AI has huge potential, but I think critical thinking is so important, and we just need to make sure that doesn't erode, and a human always needs to be heart and center of that, particularly when it comes to HR, and the ethics and things like that. So, yeah.
Okay, that's nicely bring us to the next segment, analytics confessions. So, Philip, can you share with us some analytics confessions?
Oh my God, so many. Have so many scars. And look, I'd kind of caveat, I think, that's where you learn things, right? You're going to make mistakes and things. So I would always say, look, don't be fearful of that. You're in a safe space. But I recently attended an amazing panel discussion from Alice, Greg Newman, and Adam McKinnon at a conference a few weeks ago at Talentpalooza, and it was a great conversation because this was one of the conversations that came up in terms of the mistakes that you make, and so I think for me one of the big ones was that I remember I once had filtered out all contingent worker employees, and then in a particular business unit, and then I realized 80% of the business was built of contingent workers, which was the IT function. So for me, again, it just shows context is key, and understanding, and in a lot of the definitions of things, because you only have light profiles for contingent, most of the insights and focus was around the perm workforce. So I just remember going to the IT exec, and basically we only had data on 20% of their organization. So that was definitely a memorable moment for me and a learning. So again, really understanding your workforce mix and your organization is important. So many, but that's probably one confession for today. How about yourself, Lucia? What's
I can totally relate to that one. But for example, from my side, I once spent 3 days building dashboards, and I did a lot of work with nice visualizations, nice charts, everything. And then I found out when I shared it with the audience that actually no one was using it, or no one actually needed that, because I didn't do a proper homework before I started, and I didn't understand properly what decision they were trying to solve or make. So that was a big learning, because when you spend 3 days working on something and then it's just waste of time, you have to learn hard way.
And again, I've been there, and I bet many people can empathise with that one. I've also had a similar scenario where we've had a very vocal stakeholder say, oh, I want this. And then you spend a month building it, and then they're like, oh yeah, no, I don't want that anymore. Like, actually, I've moved on, got another idea. And you just think, oh, great. You know, so
yeah.
Again, you built everything around one person, you know, as opposed to, trying to build for the majority rather than that just one vocal stakeholder. But yeah, again, like how many times you put blood, sweat and tears into doing something that you think is good, and then they realise, nah, actually, no, I don't agree with that. It's not important. So you just, again, a little bit of you dies inside.
That actually makes me wondering, what's the weirdest stakeholder request you have ever received?
Oh my goodness, so many.
If you have to choose one.
I think it's not kind of weirdest, but I remember, and I always used to have this issue that I think we had a request where basically somebody requested, they downloaded an extract and they wanted us to turn that into a table, which wasn't a lot of work at all. And so for me, the reason why it was weird, it was like, well, you have access to go and pull this. You have the tools to do it. And it was basically, they just didn't want to do it. And they just felt this is like low level admin. I don't want a self-service. I'm too busy for this. Can you just do it for me? And so for me, that was a bit of a weird request in the sense that, well, you don't need our highly skilled specialist people to do that. You could do it for yourself. And in fact, most grads out of uni could do that. You know, it's a very basic level thing. So, but again, look, you always want to try and serve and do the right thing. So we were like, well, look, we're fine to do it this time, and we're happy to show and train you how to do it, but we're not going to keep doing this for you. And unfortunately, there was a time where they just were like, can you now, this is your job for me every month. I'm going to come and ask you to do the same thing. So I think this is where you need that constructive challenge and say, look, this is the kind of reason why 86% of orgs stay in that op, because they just pick up this kind of stuff and they want to please people, but then they just do this one-off ad hoc, and then it's like, great, that was really useful, now I want this ongoing. And it was just like, now it's becomes a full-time job for somebody, you know. So so I think for me, I got a lot of those that I'd see weird requests, because I'd always say, okay, you've come through to our team, so you must not have the right tool or the access. No, you've got all of that. So, okay, so you could do this. This is a very low level. So I was like, well, okay, so why do you need us to do this for you? Oh, it's because I just don't want to, you know. So it's like, that's a different conversation. So how about you?
Oh, I have one funny one. So once one person from high leadership came to me, and this person specifically liked to use word correlation. And he kept coming to me and he was like, Lucia, we have to build some charts, something like with correlation. I was like, okay, well, what are the data? What is the case or something?
Excuse me.
And there was always like, oh, I don't know. It's just like, it needs to be correlation. You know what's correlation? I was like, yes, I'm familiar with that, but I need more context. So I was getting, especially from not with very technical background people, this type of request when something sounds like salesy and good, and they just wanted this kind of like service to provide. And then I was thinking like, okay, well, let me see what we can do, but usually I wouldn't go for that.
So like maybe again, there's a lot of buzzwords, right? And I think particularly in HR, we do like our buzzwords and reinventing things. Like I think a big buzzword I see now is human-centered design, you know, and like people are calling it, you know, human-centered AI or person-centered, you know. It's like, I feel like there's already been a well-established literature and things. It's a well-defined concept. Why are we trying to relabel and come up with new quirky buzzwords. And it's almost like we're discrediting all this prior research that was done. I can empathize with that one as well. So rather than I want to answer a question, can you help me like use the word correlation? I want to get that word in.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other one is it's correlation doesn't infer causation. That's another common one I think we get. It's like yes, but it's anyway.
Yeah. I would be actually curious, what about our audience? They can maybe share with us some of their analytics confessions, some funny, painful examples.
I'd love that. And again, for psychological safety, we can do it anonymously. But yeah, we'd love to hear, and we can have a bit of what are some of the funniest or weirdest stakeholder requests that you've been asked? When did a model or dashboard completely miss the mark? We'd love to hear from the audience. I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so to wrap up, let's maybe share like aha moment of the week. So Philip, what was your aha moment of this week?
Mine, I think, was seeing a company stop using turnover as a metric and started measuring regrettable loss. And I think for me, that was a bit of a game changer in how they approached talent. So again, going back to my whole positive psychology, glass half full, I think for me that was a big aha moment I saw in terms of they're just kind of trying to change the lens around that and really using that in terms of how they approach their talent, regrettable loss. But I'll probably pause there. That was probably my one this week.
So I can share my one. Your dashboard is only as useful as the meeting it lands in. I think this is very, very true.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have the use of the dashboard, the value, you don't have the buy-in, then actually you are asking why. Why do we even have these dashboards? Or why do we even build it?
Yeah, so
if
true.
It is not used.
So true.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And again, it's like, you do all of this work, is it an appendix somewhere that nobody really reads and gets to and talks? It's on the agenda, but it just, goes into a black hole. So again, I agree. It's only as useful as the meaning it lands in. And then it's all about what do you do with it,
So if you enjoy the conversation, help us spread the word and subscribe, leave a review, or just pass it on your team over coffee.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, again, if you've got a people analytics confession, headline, or you'd like to share an aha moment to share with us, please, again, drop us a line, and we might well feature it next time. So again, if you're happy to be quoted and leave your identity, but again, if not, we can just put it as anonymous. But either way, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucia.